In this building, you can hear the struggles and differences that tore our nation, and the courage of conviction that got it back together. These are the voices of Seminary Ridge. These are the voices of duty and
There's a
devotion.
schedule of events. Oh, yes. Tomorrow, if you would. I got that. Oh, you have it. Okay. I do. There you go. Thank you. We're out on the block for the sunset, right? Yeah. Good.
Both of your minutes should be in, if you manage that one and the tall.
Oh, yes. That's at the end of your, yeah. Well, that's my fault. I just want to make sure everything, you're going to check out.
I was telling you.
And I don't know if you want it for today or if you want it for forever.
Let me.
Come on.
The Union sent Brigadier General John Buford to the Seminary Division of Shadow. The enemy's moved to a small, thriving town at the center of 10 well-traveled roads, Gettysburg. Buford realizes that if a battle is to be fought nearby, holding the high ground will be crucial. His men, outnumbered 4 to 1, must delay the Confederate advance until the Union infantry reaches town. Buford and his signal officer view their surroundings from the seminary's cupola. He decides to make a stand here.
On July 1st, between 8 and 9 a.m., reports came in. The enemy was coming in force.
Brigadier General John Buford.
I saw from the steeple of the seminary a portion of the rebel cavalry.
First Lieutenant Aaron Jerome.
We have the advantage of position, he of numbers.
For 3 long hours, Buford's cavalry slows the Confederates, but they're running out of time and ammunition.
We maintained this unequal contest until the leading
8 o'clock, an ominous sound was heard. A sound that struck terror to the hearts of all who heard it. It was the call to battle. All was excitement. Company after company, regiment after regiment fell into line, and accompanied by strains of music, the march began towards the front. Lydia Ziegler, Gettysburg.
Charlie and I marched along the road till we came within a mile of Gettysburg. And we heard
To the tower of the building. We saw the battle with a puff of smoke from the mouths of booming cannons several miles west of the seminary. We watched the advance of the Confederates until shells from their guns aimed at the Union Army signal in the tower. They were unsafe.
To the arrival of the other divisions of the army, which were ordered to hasten forward. General Robert E. Lee, Confederate States Army.
There's no movement seen to be. I rode off north from town and noticed a wooded hill northeast of Gettysburg. Coast of an elevation to command the country for miles each way, and overlooking Cemetery Hill above the town. Returning to see General Ewell, I said, General, there is an eminence of commanding position. and not now occupied as it ought to be by us or the enemy soon. Give me a good regiment, and I will take that hill. Major General Isaac Trump, Confederate States Army.
The first place we got to was Clarksville, but the shells and bullets drove us out. Next, we went to Spangler Spring, with no better result. Then we stopped on Rose Hill. We were drenched to the skin and oh so very tired and hungry. The shells and bullets began to fall, so we were wandering again and again. Our poor faithful old dog Sport could no longer walk, so we children took turns in carrying him. Lydia Ziegler, Gettysburg.
Appliances. For 3 days, we were left without food, drink, or attendants to listen with painful anxiety to the boom of cannon and the din of battle. Lieutenant Colonel George McFarland.
When the shooting finally stops, Gettysburg residents emerge into a landscape of death. Sarah Broadhead, a 30-year-old mother, is anxious to offer help.
Early this morning, I went out to the seminary. Hundreds of men wounded in every conceivable manner. Had anyone suggested such sights as these, I would have thought it madness.
Lydia Ziegler is just 13. Her parents work and live in the seminary.
The dying and dead were all around us. It was a ghastly sight to see some of the men lying in pools of blood on the bare floor. Nurses and doctors were in demand everywhere.
A medical staff of less than 20 valiantly sets to work, but nearly 600 remain to kill the seminary's wounds and eyes. A mini ball to the torso means almost certain death. Amputation is the only remedy for shattered limbs.
Here in our lot,
Ellen Orbison Harris, Ladies' Aid Society of Philadelphia.
worse horrors met my eyes on descending to the basement of the building. Men, wounded in 3 and 4 places, not able to help themselves the least bit, lay almost swimming in water. Sarah Broadhead, Gettysburg.
It was a ghastly sight to see some of the men lying in pools of blood on the bare floor, where they had been placed on the first and second days of the fight, many of them having received no care whatever.
151st Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry, Saturday, August 1. A beautiful, cheerful-looking day, but very warm. I am sitting up in bed with my left leg bound up and swung above the bed. Right, amputated, lying on a pillow, and Mrs. McFarland fanning me, Ellen on her lap, and Horace at her side. Lieutenant Colonel George McFarland, 151st Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry.
About this time, I was transferred to the seminary, when there were only a few Confederate officers, the buildings being almost exclusively appropriated to the use of wounded Federal officers. Douglas and I were the only prisoners able to leave there.
In the consequence of the enemy taking all of my instruments, medicines, and assistance, I was unable to amputate his limb until the third day, at which time extravasation had taken place to such an extent that sloughing took place and union by granulation was the consequence, making recovery long protracted. Surgeon Amos Blakesley, 151st Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry.
Assistant Surgeon Abraham Haynes was left without supplies of any kind. Finding in the cellar of a deserted house a crock of lard, he took a sheet from a bed. A wick was prepared, and soon a lamp was burning. By this light, he dressed wounds for the first evening. Reverend Isaac Montfort, Indiana Military Agency.
Of history here.
I'm not sure how long I'll be.
You're not far though, right?
I can walk here.
Oh, nice. Perfect. I wasn't sure if it was walkable or not.
Yeah, but I drove.
We have to hold it in.
So conceived, so dedicated. All in uniform.
We are met on a great battlefield of
I know,
battle.
that's just.
You've come to dedicate a portion of their field.
You know how brains get wired like that. I know the world of God. I mean, it's not his fault or why, he created all this and that came along with it. And
Yeah, but.
That's what I say, you know, they want me at the museum, okay. I'm right here.
Well, once they're ready, I don't know where they're. I think down, but, you know, oh, they were.
Yeah.
I wanted to know how to get there, so I didn't come up the directions. I didn't answer.
Some of the little stuff like setting up the gift shop and you know the kind of the minor stuff that had fallen through the cracks was stuff that we had to do. Getting a sign, an admission. I remember that they didn't have an admission sign, and I didn't realize until like a couple of weeks before that there was no way to let people know how much it cost. So anyway, stuff like that. So museum opens on July 1st. 1,300 people through the door that first day, and as the summer went on, they were looking for a full-time visitor services coordinator, and I was in my second semester at Shippensburg in the master's program, and I applied for the visitor services coordinator position and got it, and so I was hired full-time starting on January 1st of 2014. And around that same time, our director of education had left, and they didn't rehire her position. And so as the spring of 2014 was coming, and we had school groups coming in, they didn't have anybody to do programs for school groups. They had groups booked and nobody to do programs. And I remember sitting in a staff meeting and saying, well, you know, I kind of have a little bit of experience in education. I can do some stuff. And before I knew it, I was the education coordinator and working on designing and delivering programs to these school groups who were coming that first year.
So you're still both of you guys are in your 20s when this is going on.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I turned 25 that summer that we opened, my quarter-century birthday party.
Yeah, quarter-century of life celebration.
Is that what I was calling it?
Yeah, I was only 19.
You couldn't drink. You couldn't drink at that.
Couldn't drink until my second year here. Yeah, I was only 19 when I started.
So, and how long is it until you guys become the top dogs?
I was part-time till 2015. Then it's generally happened that I've sort of had Pete's former position each step of the way. As he's moved up the ladder, I'm on the rung right below.
Yeah. No, so.
And just real quick, what are your positions?
Everything.
Currently. Right.
I'm the executive director of the museum, and concurrently I'm the president of the Seminary Ridge Historic Preservation Foundation, which is the nonprofit foundation that actually operates the museum. So we could really get into the legal mumbo jumbo here, but the museum as a legal entity does not exist. The Historic Preservation Foundation is the legal entity. If you see anything on our 990s, or even if you're donating to the giving spree tonight on behalf of the museum, you'll see us listed as the Seminary Ridge Historic Preservation Foundation. So I'm the president of that.
Okay, Cody?
And I'm the director of education and museum operations. I've been in that role for going on 3 years. It was 2 years in spring of 2021.
Yeah. So I became the executive director in 2020.
Okay, so very recently.
Doesn't feel like it.
No.
And really, I mean, when you think it's been 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and so in that time, though, I mean, I'd always known that the seminary existed as a museum, but in the time since you guys, got up there, taken over, I should say, it's just far more noticeable, I guess. You're doing, in other words, you're doing a great job at getting attention for the place.
It's really interesting because, I kid you not, we had this conversation this morning about
patting yourselves on the back.
Yeah. We heard we patted each other. It's how it hurts to pat
Look what we did.
Yeah. No, I mean it was interesting because the seminary. I'm trying to figure out how to say this tactfully and diplomatically. One of the reasons that the seminary moved out here in the first place in 1832 was they wanted to be away from town. The seminary has a specific mission to train ministers for the Lutheran faith, and they do that very well. But opening a museum is a different story. That's a public-facing endeavor. Mm-hmm. And for 150 years, I think that the seminary struggled with its place in the battle. That the battle was a distraction, it was an inconvenience. And I remember having a conversation with John Latcher, who was the former Park Service superintendent, and he said that when he first came to Gettysburg in 1995, one of his initial meetings was with the then seminary president, who wanted the Park Service to move the tour route off the road that we're sitting on right now. That's federal land Park Service tour route. And it was a distraction to have these buses going through. So fast forward to 2013, suddenly there's this desire to have people come to this museum. Suddenly we're trying to reverse 150 years of stay off our campus. Now it's, yes, please come to our campus. Yeah. And I was telling Cody this morning that, I made a decision. I remember making a decision in 2018 to engage with the community more. That we had not been as public facing and as engaged with the community as we should have been those first 5 years. And I went out and spoke to the Civil War Roundtable. I went out and met with the library director. I met with the director from the Y, and I wanted to become more of a part of the community, and it's paying off. I mean, it's showing.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback off of the idea that this was a uphill battle historically for the seminary through the years, and a great way that is shown in the historical record is when you look at the agreement in the 1960s when the Historical Society moved into Schmucker Hall. The lease agreement, one of the first lines that the seminary had, this isn't verbatim, but I think it's pretty close, was that the building cannot ever be used to interpret the Battle of Gettysburg. And it really was, up until 2013, that was largely not the case. There were toward the end of the Historical Society's tenure in the building, periodic cupola tours, things like that. But it really was up until 2013 that you could pass by the seminary grounds and you'd have no idea that there was massive amounts of bloodshed on this campus and a hospital inside of that building, unless you're with a licensed guide who mentions it, or you see one of the couple of War Department markers that are out here. So there was that up until the time the museum opened, and then 5 years up until 2018 of not engaging with the community in a forthright manner, and that's changed.
And it's doing things like this. I think that and you've been an inspiration. Pat yourself on the back because right. Exactly.
My shoulder hurts.
Yeah. Building a community of people that we are a museum, we have exhibits, we do educational program, but we place a high priority on the visitor experience and making this into a place where you want to come and to come back to, and to have programs and events like this where we can engage with our friends. That's something that we started doing and we want to do more of.
Yeah, I find it so interesting that the seminary for so long, especially after the movie came out, was still kind of like get off my lawn, because the movie, especially, if this building or that building wasn't iconic already, the movie made it iconic even more. And so of course people are going to want to see it. People are going to want to drive up to it and see it. So I'm glad they came around.
Yeah.
Because I think it's fascinating. So you guys weren't involved with anything, what?
Yeah, no, I'm answering the question.
What was my question?
We weren't involved with
It's more of a statement.
Setting up, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Is that
okay.
what you were gonna
That's exactly, oh, wow, you're ahead of time. Okay. We're so in sync. You guys were not involved in the setting up, right? So when you guys started here, the floors were already established and built. So you didn't see what it looked like. Do you know what it looked like before?
You were here.
Yeah,
right?
first time I ever went through the building was October 2012, and I had to wear a hard hat to go through it.
Oh.
So they were still doing a lot of the restoration work. And I remember the day that I walked through, they were laying out with either tape or paint or something on the floor of what is now the lobby. Historically, the dining room had been used as a meeting space by the Historical Society, and now it was just this open space that was going to become the lobby. And they had on the floor, it would say like admissions desk and bench, film. And so the first time that I went through was just kind of this general, sort of tangible blueprint sketch of the space. And I think the other thing too that they were doing at that time, or maybe just done, I don't remember exactly where they were in the process, was making the openings on the third floor corner rooms where you see at one end of the hall, the openings are relatively small to look into the surgeons and the wounded rooms.
Right.
They wanted that to be a smaller space so that if small children were there, parents didn't want them looking in, and at the other end of the hall it was totally open. They were taking out any sort of wall that was there before that. So those are the couple of things that really stuck out to me. I think the other thing that was happening around that time too, maybe even the day that I came in for my interview for my internship, was they were starting the process of putting key card readers on the outside of Valentine Hall, because it was the first time that people from the public were going to be invited and welcomed onto the campus. And even something like building security to get into the main building wasn't
Right, there weren't people roaming around all the time.
Now the museum was coming forth. So it was really fascinating to see kind of that early iteration, 8-9 months before the museum opened, of some of the changes that were taking place. And some of those things went, the admission screen Pete mentioned. I remember like some of the murals on the walls, the trail signs outside. It was up till within that last few weeks before the museum opened. Some of that.
I think that the mural on the second floor with Schmucker and Daniel Alexander Payne didn't go in until like June 29th.
Yeah.
I mean, they were working on that building up till the last minute. And I also remember the day that we opened that there was a tech in the closet where we run our AV out of, because we were having, and we're still having, problems with our AV system, and it's an intricate system that runs the entire building. So it was, when you really think about what the originators of this place, the museum, accomplished in the amount of time, it's really mind-blowing, because the Historical Society was in there and moved their entire collection out by the end of 2011. So nothing could happen until they moved out. And so the real renovation on the building didn't start until January of 2012. And they didn't quite gut the building, but they ran all new electric, HVAC, water, plumbing, did geothermal wells, and then closed everything back up, and then installed all the exhibits in a span of less than 18 months. And at the same time, we're writing the exhibit, we're raising money. I don't think about that often, but when I do talk about it, I'm like, how did they ever get that done? And they also knew that they had a deadline of July 1st, 2013, that it wasn't like, they could see where they were at a certain point and then open the place.
Right.
Then set an opening date. They knew that they had to time it with the 150 for the best bang for their
exposure, sure.
Best exposure.
Yeah.
And there's really a lot to be said about the way that was accomplished.
Now, when the Historical Society was there, was it just they had like storage? Is like what?
Yeah, there are some people shaking their heads. I was never in there. Were you ever in there?
I never was.
Yeah. So I've seen photos, and what's now the second floor of the museum, which was the main floor, was sort of the research floor and offices. What's now the first floor was meeting space and a little kitchenette, and then the third and the fourth floor and even the attic were just chock-a-block with stuff. And I was talking to he was the general contractor who did the project, and he said to me, this was a few years ago, that what he meant was that for 50 years there had been all of this pressure on the floors, and they didn't know exactly what was going to happen when they took everything out.
Right, yeah.
And luckily nothing happened. But one of the stories that I hear, that I have heard from John Spangler, who was the seminary's vice president at the time, and the project manager on the seminary side, he tells this story about being in his office in Valentine Hall one day and getting a phone call from the general contractor, who said, "You need to stop what you are doing right now and come over here to the museum." And by the time John had gotten there, they had shut off the power to the building because they opened up one of the walls, and there was what John has described to me as a rat's nest of electrical wires, including a wire that was arcing. And so when I tell people about the work that the Seminary Ridge Historic Preservation Foundation undertook, that's the story that I tell, because that's how close that this building, our building, came to burning down. And frankly, it would have taken the Historical Society collection with it. If that. So it's nothing short of a miracle or divine providence or whatever you want to call it.
Oh, it is a seminary.
It is. But again, that the work needed to be done.
That's the one thing. I love old houses, but every time I've moved into one, I've always been afraid of what's in the walls. And then you go in the basement, you see all the different types of electrical work that is no longer active, but they just leave it there, and you're like, Jesus. So, all right. So, Cody, tell me what is the one memory that you have from working here that might be, I don't know, a highlight of your career, or maybe a wild story or a goofy story, or someone famous that you might have taken, besides me, that you might have taken up to the cupola?
Well, he might be the least famous person I've ever taken.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're probably right.
Who are you?
Yeah, exactly. Your inspiration.
I think I would say it's probably the one that really jumped out to me was the 155th anniversary.
Okay.
So 2018, and this is this starts out really uneventful, but I walked from the museum over to Schmucker House where our offices are, and I was making copies, and I was standing at the window which faces toward the west here, toward the street, which in 1863 would not have been there in the fashion it is today. There was a small farm lane here, and we know that along that lane, soldiers of the 147th New York passed by as part of the Sandra Cutler's Brigade. And there are these stories of women at the Schmucker House kicking over pails of water because officers didn't want their men stopping their progress into battle. And I kind of had that thought as I was standing there of like, oh yeah, what would have been happening 155 years ago right now? And no sooner do I have that thought than this large group of living historians who are part of Park Service program happening at the time comes past. The 147th New York comes past. And immediately I pull out my phone and take a video. And it was just one of those moments where like, if you were standing there 155 years, almost to the moment, looking out that same window, that is essentially the same site that you would have seen. And that one has really always stuck with me.
Pretty good timing. How about you, Pete?
For me, it's the day that we opened, and I was up in the cupola as I didn't get to see the dedication, the ribbon cutting, because I was in the cupola, because we knew that the minute that the museum opened to the public that we were going to have people up. So I remember standing up there and really grasping that it was exactly 150 years to the moment that John Buford was up there. And then I was first groups of people came up, and it was then Governor Tom Corbett, then Senator Pat Toomey. So I got to give them a tour, and then right after them was James McPherson.
No.
Yeah. So
no pressure.
No pressure at all. And it was, you tell me what's going on.
Right.
But it just having kind of that back-to-back experience, and I think realizing that never letting go of the fact that there was this gravity in this moment, that we were opening this museum at this exact moment that these events were happening 150 years earlier. I remember leaving my apartment and thinking that I'm doing an important thing.
Yeah.
And that's really set the tone for the rest of it, for the subsequent decade.
I'm sure. Have you given tours to people along the lines of James McPherson?
Yeah, I think nobody quite that big, but Edward Longacre, who wrote a Buford biography,
Yeah.
that was a pretty cool one to do, because he had done work on the man who literally made the cupola famous.
Sure. So as a historian and in that essence a tour guide, and you're giving a tour to someone who you've read, I'm sure you look up to in some way, and you're the one telling them something. How is that nerve-wracking? Because that would freak me out.
In my case, I try to look at it more as a conversation and really use it as an opportunity to learn from them. I mean,
how do you do that? Like, how do you play that?
It's hard to say. It's just we go up there and kind of just talk. It's not even like a specific tour.
Right, I got you.
That because it, one of the things I talked about, the visitor experience. One of the things that we try to do is learn where our visitors are, and if they're not interested in something, there's no point in droning on about it. So you go up there with James McPherson and start saying, well, the Confederates came from that direction. I mean, it's like, okay,
But that must be, so I guess the upper hand that you would have on him there, though, is this is his first time seeing that.
And that in that case, one of the things that I've noticed going up in the cupola is because it's sort of a circular staircase to get up there, people come out and immediately are disoriented.
Yes.
Which direction am I facing? So the very first thing that I do is really talk about what we're looking at, what landmark, orient you into the cardinal directions, but then also what landmarks can you see from from where we are, certainly pointing out the Gettysburg Hotel, which is on the square. We can't see up to Oak Hill and Oak Ridge, but you can see out towards McPherson Ridge, Her Ridge, you can see the mountains. So really orienting people, and then just kind of talking about what they want to talk about. Hey, you know, so what do you want to talk about?
And I think the other thing too is we've had this conversation in passing through the years a few times, I think, is we can sometimes take for granted how often we get to go up there, how relatively recent it is that anybody has been able to have access to that space. And so even people who have a great knowledge of the battle, of what happened in this vicinity, we literally get to work it as our full-time jobs every single day and interpret a piece of the battlefield that, you know, is in this space where it's surrounded by National Park Service ground, but it's kind of our own little personal chunk of the field. And I think the other piece of that too, going in, you know, when you're talking with someone, when someone's in the cupola who has written books, who has a great knowledge base, it's always just that mentality of staying humble, that sometimes they'll ask you a question that you're somewhat surprised that they're asking you, that you then realize, yeah, you know, I have done research on that topic. And, you know, when you're able to impart something upon the person who's written the book on the subject that you're speaking about, there's something exciting about that and humbling about that.
Up here, I'm the expert.
And I think with that, you know, I've had this thought as well. I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but there's a chance that, you know, this is unprovable, but in the list of people who have been to the cupola the most times among any person ever, like, we're up there. You know,
I actually think it's probably you.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Here's a fun anecdote. So the first fall that the museum was open, I came in, and the staff at the desk said, "Someone just requested you for a cupola tour."
God.
And okay.
I have pictures to prove it.
Went up
Stories about to tell. Yeah.
Went up and gave the tour, and when I came down, they had a crown for me that said King Cupola. And
do you still have the crown?
I don't think I do. No.
Probably somewhere.
Yeah,
I'm sure we wouldn't have thrown that out.
Yeah, I mean, you must have that crown somewhere.
Maybe you can.
Oh, it's right here.
Ladies and gentlemen, Martin Sheen.
Oh, you ruined my surprise. Right. Might as well bring him out now. Ladies and gentlemen, Martin Sheen. All right, so now we just recently celebrated the 30th anniversary of the movie.
Really?
Yeah. And the cupola scene. Now, there was a set built out on a farm when they did the first day's battle scenes. So whenever you see the seminary building and it looks really short, that's a set. That's a facade. But this cupola was actually they did shoot around here as well. The What Goes John scene was actually shot here. That wasn't done out at the. So with Sam Elliott was.
Dale Fetzer.
Yeah.
What? Now he thought that was out there. Well, it's been a while. But Sam Elliott was actually up in that cupola for the What Goes John exchange.
Yep.
Not all of this though. The other scenes were shot out at the fake cupola. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So the rule of thumb the next time you watch the movie is anytime you can see only the sky or the tops of trees behind the cupola, that's the real thing. And you can tell you're looking up at it. Anytime that you can see buildings in the background, I'll put that in quotes because it's actually the Matthew Brady photograph is recreated with color behind the scene. Anytime you're kind of looking through the cupola as if you're at the same level as it, that's the set.
Right.
And when you put the two side by side, it's pretty obvious. When you're watching the film and it seamlessly goes from one scene to another, you can't really tell.
Yeah.
But when you put them side by side, it's pretty
nerding out.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think the weather is different too in the two different shots.
Yeah.
I think it might be like a little sunnier when they're doing the close-ups of Buford watching the battle, and you can actually see the battle. That's another clue that you can see the battle.
Yep.
And then I think the Buford Reynolds scenes is a little cloudier.
And that's when they're meeting each other in the front lawn, especially the director's cut. I think it's a longer scene there.
Yeah.
That's the real thing. You can see a small portion of Valentine Hall, which historically would not have
Right,
been there.
right.
And the night before the battle, Buford's writing the note. he's sitting in a bench out in the front lawn of the actual seminary.
Was that bench actually there, or was that added for the movie?
I
You don't know.
And believe it or not, I am reading Killer Angels for the first time. It's only taken me.
I only listened to the Audible version like 5 years ago for the first time.
Yeah,
so.
but that scene, him when he's writing that letter in the book version, he's doing it somewhere else. He's not doing it in the cupola. I forget where. In front of the building.
That.
He's somewhere else. But I guess they wanted. Ron Maxwell probably wanted to show him at this iconic building, and he would have been up in this area. It's not historically inaccurate for him to have been up in this area on June 30th, but it was interesting to note the difference between the book and the movie.
Well, I'd like to turn it over to you guys in the audience here.
Just don't call my mother.
Hey, how you doing, Ralph? What you said? Don't call me mother.
Don't give the mic to
Let's go to her first, actually. But do you have any questions for Cody or Pete? Yes, sir, over there.
You're
Just
not
shout
going
it
to
out.
either.
16.
What?
16.
16?
What president?
Oh, Lincoln. Oh. Come on, give me a hard one. Give me a hard one. Number 1 to 46.
Any other presidential trivia for Cody?
Pete.
Or Pete, sorry. Whatever you
I know it's hard up here.
Brings up a question.
Anybody else? Ralph, you got a question?
Is it in the foundation documents for the foundation, or is it just staff policy that the staff is required to attend the same barber and optician?
It's in the Articles of Incorporation.
That's the second time that we've hosted 2 Addressing Gettysburg Lives. One was in the museum early this year, and out here, and both times that
It was the
a
first
version
question.
of that question has come
Yeah.
up.
People love your hair helmets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the beards.
I do have a fun anecdote about where I got my haircut.
Yeah, but go ahead.
Is in Abbottstown, my wife's cousin, and literally right next to that is the Lutheran church, where in the cemetery there is where Lydia Ziegler Clare is buried, and she of course was 13 years old at the time of the battle. Parents were the caretakers of the seminary building.
Dick. Dick does mine. Yes, Debbie.
Do you have favorite artifacts in the museum?
Great question.
Great question.
Go,
please.
So mine is probably the smallest artifact that we have. There's a story that takes place probably almost exactly where we're gathered right now. On the afternoon of July 1st, 1863, Robert Cummins, commanding officer of the 142nd Pennsylvania, suffers a grievous wound to the chest, is mortally wounded. And as his men are falling back to Seminary Ridge, George McFarland, commanding officer of the 151st Pennsylvania, in the same brigade, grabs the 142nd colors. And he utilizes the flag to rally the remnants of both regiments behind the rail barricade here on Seminary Ridge. And I think there are at least 3 eyewitnesses who discuss some version of this story. And Pete and I were out, friends of the museum, Faye and Ed Max, out in Chester County, who have a large collection of Civil War artifacts. And 2 years ago, fall of 2021, we were out and looking for pieces to put out for our next rotation. And one of the pieces that I pull out of the box is just this small, maybe the size of a deck of cards, little piece of like plexiglass. And it has written in this old handwritten note between the pieces of glass, it says fragment of the flag of 142nd Pennsylvania. And it's just a small, maybe dime-sized red fragment of one of the stripes of the flag. And so that we have that on display on the 4th floor. But I think because of the story that's attached to it, it's used as this symbol on Seminary Ridge. It's a small piece of it, but it has a powerful story behind it.
Yeah, for me, it's the medical specimens that we have borrowed from the National Museum of Health and Medicine. And during the Civil War, surgeons were instructed to send interesting medical specimens to the new Army Medical Museum in Washington, D.C., most famous specimen of which, probably many of you got, Dan Sickles' leg. But we have medical specimens on display from men that were in the seminary hospital. We have fragments of a bullet that were removed from the face of a soldier named Dietrich Dassenbuch of the 151st Pennsylvania. And the two pieces, it's two fragments of the same bullet, have hair from his beard, go back to the beard, on it. And it's just this connection. And what's great, the provenance is second to none. I mean, it was sent to Washington, D.C., still has the same catalog number that it was given when it arrived there at the Army Medical Museum. And you can just, search that number and find that. So we have also a scapula, shoulder blade that was removed from a soldier post-mortem. And we have that on display. And again, talking to these collectors, Faye and Ed Max, I asked Ed if he had a photograph of the soldier, and he did. We knew the name of the soldier where the scapula was from. And so I said, hey, have you ever heard of this guy, Francis Hilliard? Ed said, yeah, I have a picture of him. So we have the scapula, and then we have the photograph of the guy. Wow. So it's just, so when you talk about the fact that Cody and I really didn't have a hand in the design of the exhibit, one place that we have had a great impact over the last decade is changing the artifacts and picking new artifacts that tell these stories, that are ways that we can get people engaged and say, here are these medical specimens, this is the story that goes with them. Here's a remnant of the 142nd flag. This is the story that goes with it. And it's just that tangible connection to what happened here on the Ridge or here in Gettysburg.
Yeah. Did I see a hand go up there? Yes, sir.
Yeah. The main entrance, was that considered, like, why do I have in my head that it is the first peace monument or something that...
Peace portico?
Because you're right. You have it in your head because you're right. So it's actually, so the side where the peace portico is the western face of the seminary building, which is the back of the building. When the building was constructed in 1832, the side that faced the borough is the main entrance, and the side that faced the west is the back. And so in 1913, you have the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. 55,000 or so veterans are going to return. There's a big tent city, and the seminary opens its doors once again to allow people to come in its building. It really didn't have a choice in 1863 to open its doors, but this time it had a choice. And in fact, if you look at the correspondence about using the seminary as a hotel in 1913, there's a lot of back and forth, and then the seminary decides, because it's going to get a little bit of money, to do that. And as part of the 1913 reunion, there was supposed to be the dedication of a peace memorial somewhere by the high water mark. In fact, the reunion is called the Peace Jubilee, but they can't get the money together. The seminary takes the money that it gets from being a hotel and decides to put up a monument to peace on the western side of the building. So from 1914 to 1938, the only monument to peace on the Gettysburg battlefield is attached to the back of Schmucker Hall. And we like telling people that. So it is part, and so over time, the top part of it disappeared. And so if you were here during the period of the Historical Society, there was no top of the peace portico. And because it is part of the period of significance for the building, when the museum was created, they rebuilt that peace portico. And it gives us an opportunity. We bring people out there, do tours, talk about peace and reunion. So it's a great teaching tool.
Very good. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Have either of you ever witnessed any oddities, paranormal,
Oh,
or
I
anything?
knew you were going to ask that. Ghosts.
Never have. You can come back at 2 o'clock.
Yeah,
in the morning.
here's your chance.
That's why we do it.
Yeah, we've been there early mornings, late nights, all night. Yeah, we've never seen anything.
Bats.
Yeah, bats.
Bats.
And my long-suffering wife, for many reasons, is also a witness to the phone calls that I get sometimes at 3 o'clock in the morning when the alarm goes off, the burglar alarm goes off, and I have to come over and let the police in. But when the burglar alarm goes off on the 4th floor and hasn't gone off on any other floor, it's pretty good chance that it's a bat.
Or Spider-Man is broken.
Or Spider-Man is broken, and I have said that. But no, we've been in that building. I've been in that building alone at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I have not witnessed anything. I mean, it's a little creepy, but nothing.
I think it's more than anything just kind of that eerie feeling of being a place you don't feel like you're supposed to
You
be.
freaked yourself out in the basement yesterday.
I did, yeah. So tomorrow morning, we're doing the Seminary cellar experience. We're opening up the cellars for the first time. And I won't give too much away. I want you all to participate in that. But there are some audio elements that go along with it. And while I was setting everything up the other night, there was this weird kind of like, mood that you get this overwhelming sense of, wow, these are sounds of soldiers who were wounded, things like that, water running. These are sounds that for a few days in the summer of 1863, there were people suffering in this space who were experiencing that same sort of thing, and worse. Of course, we can't recreate it all, but there's something about that sense of sound of the literal creaking floorboards that we hear when you walk through, and I think that's kind of heightened if you're either alone, if you're in a space where something significant happened or something tragic happened, and there's just kind of that general sense. It's the same kind of thing. Anybody who's ever gone on one of the campfire programs that the Park Service does, and there's that like few minutes that you're leaving, you have to, of course, go down Confederate Avenue to get off the park property. But it feels weird because you're in a space that isn't technically open to the public.
Right.
And there have been times where I've done that and it's like foggy. That's really really creepy.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not creepy because I'm afraid that I'm going to see something, but it's just eerie. Maybe
it's eerie because it's not the time that people are typically in these spaces. This isn't quite along those lines, but I think it's adjacent to it. I have this. We talk about weird dreams we have sometimes about being here, and I have this weird recurring dream that I have every once and again, and it's almost the same thing every single time, where I'm at the desk and the building looks like it currently does, and I'll tell the staff I'm going to go up to the cupola. I understand that right now only the view is going to look like it did in 1863. And every single time that I get to the top of the cupola stairs, I wake up. And it's this really strange, like, I don't know what that is, something in my subconscious of the power of the place. That
I was going to say, you go up and you see the Brady photograph of middle street.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the other part of our work is that we are in Schmucker House, which is the second oldest building on campus, which was the home of the first president, Samuel Simon Schmucker. That one is a little more creepy, and
why is that?
Well, first of all, it hasn't been updated in 50, 60
The kitchen's
years.
kind of creepy.
Kitchen's creepy. The basement. The basement is really creepy.
Straight out of a horror movie.
Really?
Straight out of a horror movie, yeah. And
Why?
well, it hasn't been updated. It was the kitchen. The old cooking hearth is down there. It's dark. It's dingy.
The largest. This is not hyperbolic. I think the largest spider I've ever seen in my life.
Forget it. I was just going to ask you to take me down, but
No. I mean, I had to go down there the other day to reset. And the other thing is that somebody thinks that a raccoon got down. We're having work done on the Schmucker House porch, and one of the workmen came up to me a few weeks ago, and he's like, "Yeah, I think a raccoon got down in the basement." I was like, "Oh yeah, this is going to be fun." So we kept the Bilko doors open for a couple of days, in which time probably chipmunks and squirrels and stuff, snakes got down there. And then I had to go down a couple of days ago to reset the boiler, and I took a broom with me. just got down there as quickly as I could, reset the furnace, and came back up.
So the seminary building, the Schmucker House, what of all the buildings that are here on this road, what are the most original ones, or how many original buildings are there?
So there are 3 original buildings, house and then Kraft House, which is right across the street next to the chapel over here. And the exterior of that is original, but it was gutted by a fire in the early 2000s. So actually it's pretty cool because it's sort of a modern house inside the historic shell. And then even if you go up the ridge, you have the James Thompson House, which is right at the end of the block, owned by our friends at American Battlefield Trust, and then of course on the other side is the Mary Thompson House.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were here in 1863, I mean, there are just a handful, what is it, half a dozen, if you include the Haupthaus, half a dozen buildings here on the ridge.
Right, this is not here, this building.
Correct,
obviously.
this was 1910.
Yeah.
And when they're about to construct this building and they're digging into the ground, I think it's around 1907, they find a piece of a coffin on like basically where this building is today, one of the corners, I believe is what the newspaper accounts say. And it's inconsistent. Some of the reports say that it's a piece of a wooden coffin, pieces of an American flag that appears to have been draped over it, belt buckle, I think someone says. And then one of the other news reports says that there were bone fragments found. And but it was essentially, when we look at the Elliott map and we can see that there were several dozen soldiers buried here on the ridge, and at least initially before they're reinterred, one of them, their remains or at least a piece of their accoutrements is not found until 40 plus years later, right about here.
So is this building haunted?
This building has probably the second creepiest basement.
Yes.
I gotta see these basements. I haven't seen any of the basements yet. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
What time tomorrow is your basement tour?
9 o'clock. So
9
we're going to
o'clock?
do the
AM.
seminary.
AM.
Yeah, 9 o'clock a.m. Yep. We'll have you can sign up in the lobby. We'll do about 20-minute sessions, so 9 to 9:20, 9:20 to 9:40, and 9:40 to 10.
Okay, very good. Anybody else have another question or anything like that for the boys? No. Debbie, another one? Okay, go ahead, Deb.
So what are your hopes, I guess, for this place going forward? Like events you'd like to see, tours you'd like to do, things you'd like to see happen here?
I would really like to use Schmucker House more and be able to welcome people into that space and use it as hospitality, use it as an educational space. Part of the mission of the Ridge Foundation is to care for and interpret the historic properties, plural, on the seminary campus. So that falls well within our mission. So that's really where my head is going in the next 3 to 5 years, in addition to maintaining and even building on the great programming and things like this, events that we're doing.
I think for me, it's really kind of continuing to work with other organizations, work with new organizations, think about the stories that we tell, the themes that we touch on in sort of abstract ways, make connections to the full story of Gettysburg and all the themes that we discuss inside of our exhibits. And one of those themes that we've really tried to emphasize is how traditionally we think about this as a site of battle on July 1st, and then it's a hospital, and then it's then the cleanup happens. But if you've been on any of our programs over the past couple of years, you know that a heavy point that we like to emphasize is that this is the longest occupied space by one army or the other. And so really kind of interpreting it as such, that this is where things begin, this is where things end, this is occupied starting June 30th, and this is the last place Confederate forces retreat from. And I think even beyond that, placing this into that context as a place of a complicated piece of Gettysburg memory. How is the Civil War remembered at this place through things like the Peace Portico, through things like not putting any emphasis on wanting people to visit for nearly 150 years. That doesn't point toward any specific event, but I think some of those sorts of themes that as we continue to interpret both in-person programming, but then also anything we do digitally, whenever it comes time to do any sort of update to the museum exhibits themselves, those are some of the themes that we continually talk about.
There's no shortage of stories that we can tell. I mean, we tend to sort of, I'm not going to say fall back, but there are these core stories that we tell. Buford, George McFarlane, Lydia Ziegler, Daniel Alexander Payne. But we also continuously find new stories. I mean, one of the projects that Cody has sort of been picking away at is interesting seminarians. There are seminarians that go from here in the 19th century and end up in the Confederate Army, where they have interesting connections to larger events. So there's again probably hundreds of stories that we could tell and create programs and digital resources. And as Cody just sort of alluded to, at some point soon we are going to have to think about updating the permanent exhibit. That the panels, the text, the interpretation, that the interpretation changes over a period of 10 years. And when you think about that, it was probably being written 12 years ago. So a lot of things, their new scholarship comes out, and we need to keep up with the times. And we also need to give a reason for people to keep coming back. I mean, the museum relies on repeat business. Yeah. So at some point, we're going to have to think about what a reimagined exhibit looks like. And that's probably, and I've been saying this for the last 5 years, probably sometime in the next 5 years to at least be thinking about that.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Ralph has one more.
We're such interesting people.
You guys ever switch places at work? See if anybody notices?
The first Halloween, yeah.
I have an actual question.
I wore his name tag the first Halloween we were over.
We went as each other.
And I started cursing at people. And
like Gettysburg, like many tourist-oriented towns and cities with a large population of ghost tour programs, Nashville has them. And Carter House was recently approached, I don't know, by the Chamber of Commerce or whatever, to use Carter House as a ghost tour site. And the executive director there made this is how we know about this, he made a statement that many of us admire and are copying about the sacredness of the Carter House and the inappropriateness of that. Have you ever been approached about, and hypothetically then, there used to be a Seminary Ridge ghost program right here, because a friend of mine was one of the docents.
What is it with this row and ghost questions?
So
I can move.
Part of the reality of where we are is that we are still on the campus of United Lutheran Seminary. So this is private property. And the seminary, 12, 15 years ago, banned ghost tours on their campus. So we really have no say in that as the museum. But I will tell you that one of the programs that I've had in my head for years and just have not had the time to do it is to think about seances or spiritualism, which was a legitimate form of trying to make sense of the world in the 19th century. That people like Mary Todd Lincoln were engaging in seances. And that is something that I think falls into our wheelhouse. If we look at it from a legitimate historical perspective, not, hey, this is a knocking on the table sort of thing, that would be something that I would make a case for doing.
That would be cool.
Yeah, and doing it in the Schmucker house.
In the basement.
Yeah, with the spiders and the raccoons.
Yeah.
I think something along those lines as well that we have done, and you'll see it in the form of like the Living Museum tonight, or the Cellar Experience tomorrow, is that we have these documented historical cases of horrific events, of eerie events, of creepy events that take place to real people inside the context of the seminary as a Civil War hospital. And I think that sort of, to a degree, scratches at some of the itch of what people are looking for when they are doing a ghost tour experience. Is they want that nighttime experience, they want that eerie experience. And I think that we do it in a scholarly, documented way. You can read, this is a diary entry written by Sarah Broadhead on July 8, 1863. She says she found almost 100 wounded soldiers drowning in water in this cellar. And to stand in that space, that the fact that happened is itself haunting, not in the same way as a ghost story is. But I think programs like that are a way to acknowledge that, yeah, some of these things are kind of inherently creepy, eerie. Use your adjective of choice there. Ghoulish.
And yeah, we don't need to make stuff up to do that. We have enough documented diaries, letters that we can build programs that I think in some cases really illuminate the horror of this building, of this space. Sometimes it was we like to have fun and joke around and be lighthearted sometimes, but we also never lose sight of the fact of what happened here.
Yeah. Cody, Pete, thank you guys very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. You've been a great audience.
Join us for the Luminaria. One bag for each patient that was in the seminary hospital, nearly 500 in the front of the museum. Cool.
Have nearly 500 lanterns which memorialize the named patients that were patients of the seminary hospital. We know that there were several hundred more, but unfortunately we've not yet been able to identify them. So there's approximately 470 bags here for those patients, and a few more for people who sponsored ancestors or soldiers who were important to them that may not have served here at Gettysburg, but served during the American Civil War. So that's the purpose of what is here this evening. So feel free to please stroll the walking path. They are in approximate alphabetical order. The ones that fan out down there are Y and Z because we ran out of room all the way down at the end. But if anybody is looking for anyone in particular, it is in general alphabetical order. Does anybody have any questions? Well, we're delighted and honored to have you here this evening. Hope you stay all night. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that this is this event, the whole 24-hour event, is a fundraiser. We're raising funds through the Adams County Community Foundation Giving Spree to help support the museum and keep it open and all that good stuff that nonprofit people say. But so anything that you'd be willing to give this evening, go inside and do that. But more than anything, we appreciate that you're here. So thank you very much. My name is Rob Williams. I'm the Director of Outreach here. If you have any questions along the way, I'd be very happy to address them. And if I can't answer them, I know somebody who can. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.